Now we are ready to live. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. On behalf of the Department of English of Maharaja BIJLI PASI Government PG College, I welcome you all to this webinar on anxiety, depression and negativity, expressions and reflections on nature. We begin our webinar by invoking the blessings of Goddess Saraswati. Department of English of Maharaja BIJLI PASI Government PG College. I welcome you all to this webinar on anxiety, depression and
Okay. We'll do that.
शुभं करोति कल्याणं आरोग्यं धन संपदा शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योति नमोस्तुते विद्या दिव्या दीपोत्कार कानी कुंडले मोतीहार दिव्याला देखून नमस्कार. With this positive energy and blessings of Goddess Saraswati, we shall now proceed with our program, and I would invite Dr. Sarita Singh to kindly introduce today's webinar theme to our audience. Over to you, Sarita ma'am.
thank you so much, Shweta. Now, the theme and purpose of this seminar, it can be reflected in the very apt lines of Professor Peter O'Connor from Auckland University. He said that we are in these bubbles, but for a moment, creativity takes us outside our bubbles, distracts us, and gives us a purpose. Now, literature has always been a source to reaffirm our faith in this existence and promoting delight as well as education, sensibility as well as rationality, feeling as well as idea.
Excuse me, ma'am. Please stop sharing the video. Then you are not coming on front, ma'am.
Doesn't matter. It's okay.
Okay, ma'am. Now go on.
So literature then is just what connects people to greater realms and ideas. And this lockdown, it has given us a chance to do interesting things, think inside, learn new skills and knowledge to create rather than just to be a consumer. It's very important to stay positive and inspired during all this lockdown. Amidst the corona crisis, people have been forced to think more deeply, keeping their minds engaging in doing creative things in productive ways. In this context, our purpose through this webinar is to create an awareness through literature and literary forms to promote positivity and creativity by engaging in spirituality so that we can combat the vagaries and psychological setbacks with greater positivity. We are extremely thankful to our team of experts who have acceded to share their thoughts on the very pertinent issue of anxiety and depression that we all are witnessing all around. With our eminent guest list, we look forward to exceedingly interactive and informative session during this webinar. Gracing today's occasion, we have Professor R.P. Singh and Dr. Meenakshi Pava from the Department of English and European Languages, University of Lucknow, and also Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal, Associate Professor and Head Department of English, Navyu Girls PG College, Lucknow. May I now request our Principal, Professor Manju Dikshit, to please welcome our speakers and guests. Manju ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Sarita. A hearty welcome to all the distinguished guests, principals, teachers, and the students from various colleges. It's an honor to welcome Professor R.P. Singh. Department of College, especially the Department of English. I welcome you, sir, here. Again, it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Minakshi Pahwa, Associate Professor, Department of English, Lucknow University, who has been kind and your time for us. It's again privilege to welcome Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal, Associate Professor, Department of English, Navyuk College, Navyuk PG College, Lucknow. And on a personal note, Sangeeta, I'm immensely happy to have you here with us. I have a very long association with her and always wanted to invite her to the college, but somehow it didn't happen earlier. So finally it happened this way. So welcome, Sangeeta. As we all know, pandemics have ravaged civilization since its very existence and changed the course of life. The anxiety, fear, helplessness, depression, and of course hope finally got an outlet in these literary writings of our poets. So right from the poetry of W.B. Yeats, T.S. Eliot to modern poets who are writing on during this COVID period, I think it's a very important issue to discuss that how we can generate hope and positivity through our creative writing. A few days back, I went through a small poem and it really impressed me. I don't remember the name of the poet, but it was like this. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarter and I had a half. And the orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do. This is peace and contentment. It's new. I loved it. I am glad I exist. So this orange is the world of our happiness. You can consume half of it, but share the other half with others. And that gives a sense of happiness, and it also gives you the sense that you exist. So we have very eminent scholars and orators of great repute among us. So I won't take much time, and I think we can start the first session with our first speaker. Thank you so much. Once again, I welcome all the guests here. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you, ma'am. Hello. Hello.
Saritana, you're audible.
Yes, yes.
Continue.
Thank you so much, ma'am. To begin our session, we have with us our keynote speaker, Professor R.P. Singh. He is an award-winning playwright, a poet, essayist, and academician. He is a professor of English at the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow. With hundreds of research papers, articles, book chapters, he is credited with around 34 books published from the national and international fame publications. He has delivered more than hundreds of lectures as keynote invitee, guest speakers in various training programs, refresher, orientation courses, and invited to extension programs and skill development courses, and equally made presentations in conferences and seminars of national and international repute. He has been a fellow on co-funded foreign assignments, to be briefly put up as those at the Department of Gender Studies, Central European University Budapest, University of Rouen, France Maison des Sciences de la Home Paris, and writer in residence and in Uzbekistan. He has also been a member of Board of Studies, RDCs of approximately 10 universities and institutions across India, and the Chairman Course Committee of English for CBSE New Delhi. Professor Singh has worked as a NAC peer team member and consultant to several foreign publication houses. His writings have been published in leading international publications like Oxford University Press, Sage, Springer, Blackwell, Macmillan, ABC Clio, Warsaw University Press, New York, M.E. Sharp Incorporation USA, LPP Publishing Columbia, just to name a few. He is associated in various capacities and honors with dozens of prestigious journals like academic editor of the Wachung Review supported by New Jersey College English Association and has prepared several modules for distance learning programs. He is the Vice Chairman, Delegacy, University of Lucknow, and has worked as the Provost to the International Hostel of the University of Lucknow. He has guided about 19 PhDs and 39 MPhil scholars and completed 5 research projects funded from prestigious institutions like UGC, ICSSR, ICPR, ICCR, etc. As a creative writer in English and Hindi both, his plays like Flea Market and other plays, Eclogues, When Branko Flies, Shakespeare Ki Saat Raatein, and Antawad, Chain Kaha Ab Nain Hamare, they have received critical acclaim and wide popularity. Banjaran the Muse, Cloud, Moon and the Little Girl, Pathik and Pravah, and Neeli Aankhon Wali Ladki, Adventures of Funny and Bana, The World of Maybe, Two Violet Flowers, these represent his poetry. He has published some 300 poems and popular articles in newspapers and magazines and delivered many radio talks and poetry recitals. He is the recipient of 12 awards, mainly Swami Vivekanand Youth Award Lifetime Achievement 2020, Shikshak Shri Samman by Government of UP 2015, Mohan Rakesh Puraskar 2016, Saraswat Samman 2018, SM Sinha Smriti Award 2017, Bhartendu Harishchandra Purashkar 2017, Editor's Choice Award Dr. Baba Saheb Prize for Excellence 2011, and Dr. Ambedkar Fellowship Award 2006. So to begin our session, I would now like to invite Dr. Api Singh for his speech. So you may begin with your talk. Hello, sir.
Professor Vandana Sharma ji, Director, Education UP Government, Patron and Principal Professor Manju Dikshit ji, as the Principal of the college, the conveners Dr. Sweta Mishra ji and Dr. Sarita Singh ji, my fellow distinguished speakers Dr. Meenakshi Pawar ji and Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal ji, learned colleagues joining us from different part of the country, dear students and everyone who is listening to us in this webinar. I extend my heartiest greeting to all of you. This is a happy moment for me to be associated with you during this talk, during this webinar. I would like to discuss my view with the learned audience in 3 parts, in three phases. The first, I will talk about the connotation of the topic, the context of the topic, and different perspectives related with this. The second part of my talk, in the limited time that is given to us, I will be discussing about the process of formation of literature during this time. In the third part, I will be talking about the prospect of literature. The prospect of literature related to the pandemic COVID-19 and the similar thing in future. I would like to deliberate first the thought process behind the topic of the webinar. And to begin with the aesthetics and tone of it, I read a poem of mine. Because literature is a great resource, that is a great part, a great tool in our hand when we are in the phase of any crisis. So a small poem, I will start with that. Here it is, let us resist to confer. Ma'am, I am audible?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay, thank you. Let us resist to confer. Dismantled, disheartened and tired, they refuse to claim any shape of form tacit and quarrel so often. Indeed, the blueprint of thought and the cohesive art bruised of values emerged yet masked. Several black, blue, light, crafted and morphed shades, pictures, guys and farms, don't you see muse the catastrophe where lies veracity, the real, yet the real in the sense, a beleaguered spirit, which is setting the cacophonic church, let us move to street and flensing the face that facing you, fading the glance. Let us move to shacks and let us move to self. Let us move to tales that are overhead, so anxious, so disturbed. Let's see letters, your spirit, your weight in words. Let us see the mask and see the face. I'm sure power you carry. Any idea to unearth any nugget unseen, even verses unsung. So this the poem is self-explanatory. I mean, this is the thought process in my mind when I think about this topic and when I discuss, when I listen, when I deliberate upon the state of literature, state of psyche in the time of pandemic, in the time of Corona, COVID-19, Corona pandemic that is spreading around. So, in the very beginning, let us briefly discuss the various variables of the title. The title that the learned policy makers behind this seminar they have given. So, what I understand and what deliberations I could make out of this. So, the first thing it says anxiety. Anxiety. It speaks of depression and negativity during COVID-19 pandemic. It speaks of depression. The drafters have put up a colon, the drafters have put up a colon to narrow it down to the specific perspective pertaining to literary expressions and reflections, which in common terms is a further guidance. How do we see anxiety in this phase? The question arises, how do we see anxiety in this phase? It is social variant. It can be economic as well. It may deal with politics. It may deal with different political affairs, different pros and cons, different perspective of that politics. It can be a problem of miscommunication. It can relate with migration. It can relate with scarcity. It can relate with the loss of meaning, fearsome attitude, chaotic behavioral stance, slice mixing, we can say. When it is literature, genre mixing. When it is online teaching, different research pedagogies that we are adopting, different optional, we are talking about optional curricula, different planning we are doing. So, in this state of affair, when we are going through a pandemic situation, a blurred scenario is visible and the boundaries are blurred. You can say the purity is a little waning and we are leading towards a kind of mixed pastiche, a kind of collage is visible. You can say that in this case, there are alternatives or no alternative, and so on, so forth, and number of options and number of issues can come up during this phase of anxiety, depression. We can say correct or wrong, or better to say wrong or not too wrong, not so wrong. Any question comes before us, this is correct, this is wrong, or better to say wrong or not so wrong. These phenomena are visible, these perspectives are coming. Ma'am, I'm audible? Okay, thank you. So, you can say, not to forget, of course, the thin line between the reality and the virtual imagism that we are going through, that we are finding during this phase of anxiety, during this phase of pandemic. So there is a very thin line between the reality and the virtual imagism. I'm talking to you, I'm telling that I'm audible. I don't know who is listening to me. Because I don't know what will be the what will happen after 5 minutes, because electricity has dropped 2 times this morning. Okay, so this thing is may happen. I start driving from this place at ASHIANA to my Lucknow University. You will see that there are many red zones around in LD. And so what will happen tomorrow? It is not very clear. So this phase of anxiety, this phase of depression, this phase of different type of realities are blurring. They are coming. They are attacking us from different perspectives. So and not to forget, of course, the thin line. There is a very thin line between the imagism, virtual imagism, and the reality that we are perceiving. This is a very happy note for me that the organizers have chosen depression as a term here in the title and placed it as the second morphological structural construct. Depression. Depression cannot be defined in isolation. It is an outcome of anxiety. Depression is an outcome of anxiety. And so perhaps tete-a-tete interdependency towards enormous expressions of negativity. And that's why the first phrase says, the first phrase of the title of the webinar says, anxiety, depression and negativity during COVID-19. Now, since I'm in the process of explaining the drafter's choice, as the keynote speaker, because I have to explain what I could understand, I could make out. So, that title in the first part of the expression that specifically focuses on COVID-19 pandemic is a very important to understand pandemic. It is very important to understand in this context what pandemic is. Pandemic, in fact, is a major part of the chunk, is related to health, belief system, and consequently the social, political, economic, and cultural discourses around it. When it comes to the country, the nation like India, that has a long history of many dynasties, religions, and conquerors, resulting in a rich blend of cultures and many different ethnicities residing in the country. The British occupation and later rule of India, which ended with the Indian Independence Act 1947, also left a strong influence on the culture. Culture has, over a period of time, influenced the healthcare beliefs and practices in India. This is also a fact. We have visualized this phenomena with the newspaper reports and social media posting from the very beginning of this pandemic to this time, how people take pandemic, what is people's take on medicine, what is people's take on what is the take of people on different policies. Okay, so this happens. And you see, the influence of culture on health is vast. It affects perceptions of health, illness and death, beliefs about causes of disease, approaches to health promotion, how illness and pain are experienced and expressed, where patients seek help, and the types of treatment patients prefer. So this all makes our culture. Both health professionals and patients are influenced by their respective cultures. This is an observation that I could make out, I could see. Cultural bias may result in very difficult, very different, very variegated health-related preferences and perceptions. We can easily see through newspaper reports and many subcultural practices that are not reported that also sometimes become a taboo subject in talking in academic formal occasions. So being aware of it and negotiating such differences are skills known to cultural competence, and this cultural competence also come up as a significant phenomena in this phase of pandemic, what we are going through, what we are still to win, what we are going to face. So next point comes when it comes to the discussion deliberation. While talking of a pandemic, it becomes relevant to put a few discourses of health, belief systems in India and across in order to understand how the concept of pandemic is perceived in culture. And after 1970s, such discourses are becoming part of various dimensions in literary artifice and cultural enterprise of human activities. We can easily see such type of discourses in our cultural studies. So that is how the subclause, literary expressions and reflections become relevant. Madam, I am referring to your title, the subclause, it becomes relevant. Literary expressions and reflections, this becomes relevant. So I congratulate once again the organizers, drafters, makers, who have come up with a long and explanatory title in itself. It is a quite long title, explanatory title in itself. Perhaps it is an outcome of a jumbled thought process behind it. Better to say, somewhere an anxiety in itself. Somewhere we can see that because drafting a topic, drafting a scholarly topic, drafting a topic that is all inclusive, drafting a topic that is interesting as well in the page of this insipid environment around. So this is a topic. Thank you so much for inviting me to talk on this issue once again. And now, for a common scholar, when we talk about a common scholar, irrespective of any discipline, person may come from, because this is a phase, this is a issue that is affecting everyone. A person from street to a person in the parliament to a person in any academic sector, anywhere it can affect. And the same happens with we students, scholars who are looking at these realities of life from our viewpoint. So be it sociology, psychology, literature, cultural studies, law for that purpose, and of course language, not to be forgotten for any human activity, because language is we play the biggest game through language. No. So any activity or an emotional event, social and cultural state flourish only when it has prospects towards happy life or good life. Anything, the moment we are finding out such seminar, conference, why? Because there was no electricity, people are having different type of problem. Why we are creating that? Because to give something for a happy life to our students, to our stakeholders, to our people. So good life, literature, art, culture, academics, they create some good trajectory in our mundane life. We have many Sanskrit slokas, how the people Kavya Shastra Binodin, Kalo Gachadhim Tam, Haluprusanam. So such type of statements are coming up, how literature gives us food of thought, how literature creates these things to us. So therefore, as I understand, instead of making choices for negative expressions during any apocalyptic phase or crisis situation, what matters actually is happiness. How we can get very famous essay by Dennis Lee, a Canadian critic, cadence, country and silence. Silence, ultimately silence, you can get silence out of negativity also, you can achieve silence out of positivity also. Greater sorrows, greater woes are dumb, so you can say what we can have here. So ultimate process, ultimate aim is to gain happiness, and happiness, creativity, a good life, better to say, alternate constructs, and note the deconstructionist behavioral party that we are going to have, we are going to understand, we are going to infer out of such discussions. Since we have a specific time slot, and we are looking forward to hearing more insights, and of course, it will add to the richness and quality of the webinar. As I was talking about happiness, it equates with the Greek term eudaimonia. Eudaimonia. Eu is good, good self. Daimon, a spirit. In a spirit, a minor deity. So the moment happiness, so happiness in calmer parlance is rational human activity towards the fulfillment of human nature in an excellent way. And here starts the dimensions of various literary arts, various styles, forms, content, etc. I will put forward, I will in next two phases, I will discuss about my thought process on literature. Because in the very onset of spring this year, we came across the news about this pandemic spreading in different countries and how it seeped into our country. So this happened. So the first is literature, how literature is shaping, how literature is emerging in the COVID time, in the corona pandemic time. I will focus on literature, stability, change, creativity, etc. We are all aware of the fact, we all know that changes bring literature. Changes bring literature and literature brings change. Meta text on literature on pandemic are available from the very beginning of literary cultures in languages concerned. If you can find, just click Google, you will find a long list of works in different genres. I have searched more than 100 such works. So we can see that from the early time of English literature, we talk about Boccaccio, Decameron, we can talk about Chaucer, we can even have references in Shakespeare, Shelley's Adonua. Some instances are also there in Coleridge, T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, when he writes April the previous month, we have some references. You can find a long article on that issue. Okay, so Albert Camus, we have The Plague, we have Stephen King, The Stand, The King Cobra, further, and long list of literary text is available on internet freely. It is not appropriate to discuss these things because we can find a big number of articles over there and many comments, connotations over there. What I have personally visualized in the present lockdown phase and the unlock phase, I have seen a linear pattern of creativity and literature. There is a linear pattern of creativity and literature. As far as our local is concerned, and the present lockdown and unlock phase is concerned, I have personally felt different phases of emotions that have motivated, that have moved us to write. To me, personally, the first is trauma, the phase of trauma, then self-discovery, then urge, then phase of creativity, and then comes the phase of resilience. Trauma. It begins from unrest, anxiety, ennui. Many of our fellow brethren, you can say that they lost their job, they lost their employment. We people, we had the pattern of unrest. Even today we are in a phase of unrest. We are having anxiety. What will happen when we are going to invigilate in the university exams? The dates are there. So unrest is there, anxiety is there. Different patterns are there. So in this phase, what happens? We go for self-discovery. Self-discovery. We look around. We look for the ways. We look for the means. We look for the need, the habits, are many artifacts of our culture, our behavioral pattern we look for. And in this phase, what comes? There comes an urge of leisure, urge for time, urge for more power, urge for alternative mode to look at that. Fun, reading. We will all, we can all confide, we can all share that during this time of pandemic, some people say that, okay, what are you doing? Yeah, time hai, we have lot of time. Phone nahi kar rahe hain? Okay, this is one answer. Some people say that, okay, we have time, but we are not in a state of mind to do something. Some people say, okay, we have time and we are changing Apda into Avsar. How we are changing this calamity, this disaster into opportunity. We are writing our paper and we have a lot of pressure from our bosses also to produce something, to show something out to the other peer institution. So this thing we are having, we are we face. So how creativity takes, how creativity comes up. We can have descriptive literature. First of all, we were describing the things. Okay, what is corona? What is happening? What is that? What is in this page, that page? So descriptive literature. Then narrative, narrating the simple stories of experience. Narrative literature comes. Analytical literature is also there. Discourses are there. Narratives are there. Discourses are there. Then counter narratives are there. And then politicizing that. We have different problematic. We have different issues of politics over there. And ultimately, after doing all this thing, what we do? We are answering to our heart. All activity, ultimately, we have to answer to ourselves. And this is a phase of resilience. How can we give? How can we come to the phase of resilience after doing all these activities? All these activities. So, one more step, ma'am. I think I have 15 more minutes. 15 more minutes. Can I continue? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Maunam Suikrit Lakshanam. There is a statement from Sanskrit. Maunam Suikrit Lakshanam means if you are not, so you have given us consent to go for. Okay, I'll just wind up because we have more learned scholars here, and we will be deliberating upon the issue. One thing that I have personally observed while reading literature, while understanding the notions behind them, literature in the time of Corona, in the time of COVID-19, I have experienced and discussed with the researchers, with my students, with my friends, etc. There are two kind of literature, two types of literature are coming up. You may disagree with me, but this is my humble submission before you. The first is produced, literature produced and literature evolved. Literature produced is how it is produced. Pressure from peer, pressures from institutions, editors. Many of our friends, they are approaching us that we are editing an anthology of papers and to quote unquote, you are free during the time of lockdown. So why don't you write a paper for me? Why don't you write a story for my anthology? I'm coming up with the anthology. I'm coming up with a collection of poems. Why you are not writing a poem for me and we will put that. And please send it tomorrow. Please send in a week time because we want to be the first to hit the ground zero. Such type of pressures are coming up. So how literature is produced? Pressure from peer, pressure from institutions, pressure from editors, publishers, etc. And what is the nature of this kind of literature? When we write something under pressure, it is institutionalized. The person who is asking you to write, what is the nature of that journal? What is the policy of that journal? What kind of text the person is wanting you to write on? Okay, so this is subject to rise and fall of market. It is politically engaged also. It is politically engaged also. We all know, although we don't speak that much on public platforms, but many journals, institutions, periodicals, we all know that this is also having a background of politics behind them and they are motivated with certain ideology. So they are also governed by the international politics, also from the international politics. Why we are writing? Recently, someone asked me to write, and I should not share that in public platform. But the moment you write something, you also keep in your mind why you are writing. There is some incident of racism recently in US. There is this anthology of papers being published on that. Someone approached a person, A approached B, and B blatantly answered that I don't want to write on that. Why? You can guess the region, you can guess the point yourself. It is not it is not formal to discuss that. Okay, the second category of literature that comes up, it is evolved. The literature. So I was talking about. I was giving you these instances from the perspective of literature that is produced. The second category is that the literature that is evolved. It is a true account of the negotiation of the self and the environment. It is a dividend of the struggle of the self and the other forces. It is a free flow of your emotions, free flow of your ideas. It is not affected by the sanctions of the academy. It is not affected by the sanctions of your seniors. Your boss is not affected by the sanctions of the boss. And it is also not affected by the sanctions of the professors, of the critics, what the so-called quote-unquote the bigger professor will say about it, what the critics will say about this thing. This is not affected by that. It is the saga of your heart. It is the true reflection of your feelings. It is not affected by the institutions. So these two types of literature, what I have visualized, what I have seen, although printing press is not working that smoothly during this pandemic phase, but many things are published on social media or in e-form. So that thing we can visualize, we can understand. And keeping this in mind, I have understood from the very early phase. It was the very beginning of the first week of this new year, 2020. So from that time, we started listening about this pandemic in some other country, in China. Okay, so from that phase, it came to us, and you must have seen many news item, many circulation on social media talking about what corona is, what COVID is, and we were in a very state of enthusiasm. हम ही मारेंगे वो चले जाएंगे. That statement of traditional Lucknowi saying, हम ही मारेंगे चले जाएंगे. Corona क्या है? I can share with you a meme. There was a beautiful face on social media. WhatsApp, some friends said, Corona is not that ugly. It was a beautiful face and said Corona is not ugly. You can ask that person today. Call that person and ask the person, by Corona kya hai? Is that beautiful face or some ugly face? There was a very so many cartoons. I have many that artifacts also, because in the cultural studies these are all text. These are text, and we can have discourses issues based on that. So, for my understanding, I put that forward to this learned assembly of learned critics, professors across the screen. So the first phase was the phase of enthusiasm. It was lockdown one, and a little prior to that, everyone was a poet, like battling with metaphors, songs, etc. We were sharing jokes, etc. Then came the phase of paradox. The second phase that I understand is the phase of paradox. And in this phase of paradox, perhaps the romanticizing could not work. Romanticizing could not work. And the third phase came the phase of negotiation. In the phase of negotiation, there is the plight of migrant laborers. There is an issue of life versus art. There is issue of expression, narrative, discourse. You start writing. Many newspapers, they have, there is a very, suppose you start writing a poem, but the newspaper comes, in the morning you see that 4 people lost their lives in the vicinity. So what comes the state of affair, what is happening around, and you are, different issues are there. It is not the phase of lockdown, phase of lockout, this was there. So negotiation, how do you negotiate? How do you, the third phase, I'm repeating, the phase of enthusiasm, the phase of paradox, and the phase of negotiation. In the phase of negotiation, the plight of migrant labor, life versus art, expression, and narrative, discourses, your personal state of affairs, and the pressure from your institution, the pressure from the society, what you think and what the mundane realities of life of your family, the demand of your family, the demand of the society, what that is the other party. So how you are negotiating, this phase came. And the last, this phase that we are living in, this is the phase of introspection. The casualties are increasing day by day. Casualties are increasing. And literature is also branching in different shape. We can start with the early phase. If you look at the poems, the articles in newspaper in the very beginning, so they were prescriptive that this is a disease, although this is a very dangerous disease, this will, but we can end it up. There were many television programs, there were many radio programs, there were many recitation, there were Kavi Sammelan also, the poets, they used to say that we will win the situation and we are emerging as victorious. So this thing this was there. And during this phase of Corona COVID pandemic, one metaphor that is very popular, it has been the war metaphor. Why the war metaphor? From the very beginning, you can say the war. We are in the war-like situation, and one academic friend, he was so bold enough to say that. I'm writing a stories, I'm writing some novels, and maybe with the passage of time, they will be supposed like war poems, like Corona pandemic thing is there. So war gives us strength. Why we use such type of downfalls? Because war gives us strength. It gives us, it gives society and nation the force to go. It gives space to introspect. It gives space to profess also. When we are in a difficult scenario, we can speak up, we can come up with more, you can say, bolder thoughts we can come up with. It gives us momentum. Also. So, the forms, the streams of literature during this phase of COVID-19, out of my understanding, I can share, there is the cropping up of the literature of relationship. Separation is there, depression is there, retrospection is there, creation is there. Many things are there. Somebody is longing to meet the old parents living in village. Somebody is longing to meet the girlfriend. Parks are closed. Somebody is longing to meet the son, the daughter, who is separated. Somebody is longing to meet the teachers. Many things are there. People have different age group. People have different scenario, different status. They are longing. So the literature of longing, relationship. Humanism is also coming up. Idealism, protection, destruction. And we are also revisiting socialism. Migration is there, plight of poor is there, laborers is there, the plight of laborer is there. We also, we are more prone to remember, to recall, to request our gods when we are in distress. So the literature of peace and spirituality is also coming up in a increased momentum. Literature of chauvinism is also there. Blind nationalism, you can say. Environment and eco-literature is there. Because 1 month back, or almost 1 month back, it was the phase of second lockdown phase. We had a large number of messages on social media that from Kanpur you can see Himalayas, from Bareilly you can see Himalayas, and you must have seen the ghats of Ganges, that which is visible at the very bed of the river. So such type of statements, environment and eco-literature. Also, fancy and romanticism. Absurdism is also coming up. Literature of ableism. Literature of ableism is a new come up in this phase that we can see. And also, I'm quite convinced of the fact that we are going to see a new form of romanticism. From postmodern phase, it is not hyperbolic to say that we can see in the upcoming time the phase of neo-romanticism. Because we are now going to enter into a phase. And since we are discussing pandemic, literary expressions and reflections, as you have given us title, madam, well thought of title. So I experienced that Literature today has gone into the modes of observing bazaar of realities. Is there? Bazaar of realities. It is commodity fetish. We are having commodity fetish. We are having cyber realities. The patterns of cyber realities. Liquid nationalities are there. Ecological fallacy is there. Ecological fallacy, a situation that can occur when someone makes an inference about an individual based on the aggregate data of that group. Ecological fallacy. That is also cropping up. And self-referencing is also coming up. When we judge another person's culture by the yardstick of our own culture. So self-referencing is also coming up in this space. Just in 2-3 minutes, I will wind up my talk. When we are entering into the phase of post-COVID literature, people have started giving what will be the post-COVID literature. I think it is too early to think about this. It is too early. It shall be, we shall have many trends. We are going to be, and what shall be the nature of literature in the post-COVID form? It will depend on different 4-5 variables are there to my mind. The first is, are we going to be victorious? Are we going to be victorious? Are we going to be victorious after losing all our arsenals? Second variable that I understand. The third, are we going to be losers? Or are we going to be ascetic? From Indian history, I find two famous instances from Indian history. The first is Ashoka's victory over Kalinga. Ashoka's Kalinga Vijay. He got everything. He won everything. But his life was transformed. His perception was transformed. It was a kind of brainwash. Then we can have the great emperor Samudragupta, who fought, who won, and then who wrote that in the Samudragupta Prashasti. You can find easily one at Prayagraj. Okay, and also our political stance. What shall be our political stand? And also, who will lead the economy after the COVID pandemic is over? Because emergence of world equation, they shall also define our state, they shall also define our pattern. And I'm sure in academia, there will be a boom in PhD, MPhil, master dissertation projects on this phase. We shall have anthologies of papers, collection of poems. We shall have short stories, novel, different genres. And I'm sure that interdisciplinarity and multidisciplinarity, these trends are going to rock. So this is my observation on the theme in question, and I'm quite hopeful that literature is going to pave a very significant, very cozy way for us to fight with these pandemic and the issues of this pandemic. And I'm quite hopeful that we will be victorious. And my best wishes to everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for giving me time to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Sarita ma'am, am I audible? Thank you so much, sir. And before I say anything further, I will first want to take this opportunity to welcome Professor Rano Unial, Head Department of English and Modern European Languages, who also joined us before Professor R.P. Singh began his speech. She was there very much with us, and she
Welcome,
said to us, "Ma'am,
ma'am, please accept my greetings." I think she.
Ma'am, we feel extremely honored and blessed to have you with us.
Please convey my regard to Professor Rano Unial, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes,
Sure, sir.
it was a presentation and I've enjoyed it thoroughly. God
you.
bless you, Professor R.P. Singh. You've done a great job.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you,
You are
Shweta. And thank you, Shweta. I'm enjoying this session. I'm enjoying this webinar of yours. So please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
ma'am.
I'm looking forward to listening to Dr. Pava and Dr. Sangeeta Godwal.
Yes, ma'am, and we feel extremely honored and blessed that you have joined us, and it's really a great honor for all of us, ma'am. And it has really gave
Ranu,
us a
welcome.
lot of
Ranu, welcome
Yes,
to
thank
this
you.
webinar.
Thank you,
I'm really
Manju.
so pleased. It's such a pleasant surprise to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's a learning for me. I'm learning a lot from this webinar of yours.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah.
It's a source of motivation for them.
Yes, ma'am.
yes, ma'am. A very hearty welcome to you on behalf of our entire college, ma'am. And now I would want to go on to thank Professor R.P. Singh sir for such a comprehensive speech that he has given. He was a keynote speaker and he went on to explain the title and the theme of the webinar, and he justified it by explaining the terms anxiety, depression, and negativity. Thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful speech, for letting us have an insight into your creative journey. And you also told us that how during these pandemic times that are laden with so much of depression and negativity, how literary indulgences can prove to be that boat through which we can sail through these testing times. And the way you have, in very organized way, you've tried to explain the various phases of COVID-19 pandemic time, and you've divided it into phases of enthusiasm, phase of paradox, phase of negotiation, phase of introspection. So literature, how literature has been branching into all of these various phases during this time, and it was a big learning experience for all of us to come to know of the that we have this war metaphor also that has developed during the corona time, and how there have been literatures of relationship, idealism, socialism, flight of labor, and literature of spirituality, some really new terms that I personally would like to confess that I heard them and learned about them, like ecological fallacy and self-referencing. Thank you so much, sir, for that comprehensive speech, and also the relevant questions that you put up at the end of your speech, where you said that are we going to be victorious, are we going to be losers,
Yeah.
or are we going to be ascetics? Who is going to lead the economy? So you have left your speech at a very relevant note for all of us to think about these matters. So thank you so much, sir, that you have done so much of research and you have included all of your own experience into preparing this particular keynote speech of yours. So we all are really blessed and honored to a big privilege to have you with us, sir.
Thank you
And
so much.
I would want to welcome our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Meenakshi Pava, and I would want to introduce her. Dr. Meenakshi Pava is an associate professor at the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow, where she teaches courses in 20th century drama and poetry, South Asian literature, and Australian drama and fiction. Her research interests include Indian drama, folk theatre, film studies, translation studies, post-colonial literatures, and English language teaching. A Mellon Fellow at Harvard University, Fulbright Scholar at New York University, and Charles Wallace India Trust CWIT Fellow at Cambridge. She is the author of 2 books, The Dramatic Art and Vision of Tom Stoppard and Alan Ayckbourn, Chasing the Comic Muse. She has published in South Asian Review and Indian Literature. So I warmly welcome and invite her to address the August gathering. Over to you, Meenakshi ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear me? Dr. Meenakshi Pava?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So good afternoon to all the dignitaries of today's session. It is my honor to be part of this endeavor, which is a contemporary and crucial challenge. It is to the credit of Professor Vandana Sharma, Director Higher Education, Government of Uttar Pradesh, and Professor Manju Dikshit, Principal, MAHARAJA BIJLI PASI Government PG College for spearheading this effort. My deep appreciation to Dr. Sarita Singh, Head of the Department, and Shweta Mishra, Associate Professor at the Department of English, for conceptualizing and convening this webinar, especially the times that we are in. My warm welcome to our very lovable Professor and Head, Professor Ranu Nial, Head of the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow. It is great to be a part of this panel. Professor Raveen Pratap Singh, Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow, and Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal, Head of the Department, Navyug PG College, Lucknow. Thank you, Shweta, for a very kind introduction. A very warm welcome to all the faculty members and my dear audiences attending this session today from across the country. Seeing the world struggling with anxiety, depression, and the growing negativity has spurred me to talk on this topic. These are unprecedented circumstances, hence, it requires unprecedented interventions. India is a young nation, and the issue of mental health has always been on the back burner. COVID-19 brought forth this discussion center stage. At this point of time, I want to share with you the concern that we have about mental health issues in our society and the kind of stigma that has been associated since eons. So I think, as LaRouche Pacu says, there's no advantage without a disadvantage. I'd like to turn the phrase around to say there's no disadvantage without an advantage. And the only advantage I can see in this spin-off of all that has happened and disturbed the entire world in a maelstrom of confusion, unprecedented death in the times of the pandemic COVID-19. The only thing that has come up out of the churning as of now is the concern for mental health. So far, it was far and back and the beyond. Nobody really cared to talk about it. This isolation, staying away, cutting off from social contacts has had a huge toll on the mental health of all across the board and across the world. What I wish to share with you is that the title of the webinar today is Anxiety, Depression, and Negativity during the times of the pandemic COVID-19. I want to kind of tweak it to the point where I bring in the very much lovable and eternally popular, despite in the post-colonial times, Shakespeare, the cultural icon, and his engagement with issues of mental illness and mental health. The reason why I say is that this is the time when the challenges are huge in humanities. The studies of humanities is widely threatened for its sheer existence. As very lucidly and in most illustrious and comprehensive manner, Professor Raveen Pratap Singh has touched upon the scope and the gamut of which the literary studies span these very challenging times and the spin-offs of future research and academic endeavors and engagements. I wish to focus on few of Shakespeare's tragedies to bring out those characters that can help us understand, because we as students, scholars of literary studies and of literature in particular, are very fortunate to live those lives, to draw from them and be better equipped in such challenging times as COVID-19. I'm afraid I have a PPT, but I'm a bit technologically challenged, so I don't know whether I'll be able to do screen sharing. However, I'll try to do my best. So much of the country is reopening. The idea of stepping out of isolation makes some people anxious. Can you all see this PPT, or it's not available to you all? Anyway, I guess when we put it up for recorded sessions, I guess I don't want to struggle too much with it, lest I lose control of time. So I'll carry on. The idea of stepping out of isolation makes some people anxious. Across the country, cities and states are in various stages of reopening, even as cases of COVID-19 are up on the rise and rising and counting. With different messages coming from various levels of the government, there are few reliable answers about what precautions we should take, or a clear sense of whether things are under control. Uncertainty drives anxiety. Anxiety is rooted in not knowing what is going to happen. The word depression is something that we throw around so easily nowadays in varying degrees. We use it to describe from a bad day to an overwhelming inability to live life. But anyone with depression knows it is much, much more. It slowly takes over a person's life to the point where they forget how it all began. Depression is when everything feels so hard. You feel so low that things you previously enjoyed no longer hold the same joy. You wonder what other people have that you can't get a hold of. You find it harder and harder to get out of bed in the morning. You drag yourself through each day, find it difficult to go to bed at night. The feeling is so low that it seems to overwhelm your entire being, a kind of a paralysis that sets in, and you do not know how to negotiate with it. Anyone suffering from these mental health issues is described with these very common adjectives that are just thrown about and volleyed around. I wish to draw your attention to those: disturbed, nutty, freak, psycho, spastic, crazy, or mental. The University Grants Commission has been issuing regular advisory requesting higher education institutions to take all possible preventive and precautionary measures to ensure the safety and security of students, whether on campus, in hostels, or outside, as we face the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, the very fact that the management of the MAHARAJA BIJLI PASI PG College has engaged with this topic itself speaks of the volatility and the need to engage in a topic of this nature. I plan to share with you a few characters drawn from famous Shakespearean tragedies and his very deft portrayal and engagement with his characters. To this day, Shakespeare continues to abound us with his power to create very human characters. When we experience his plays, we identify with love, anguish, fear, triumph, and disasters that these people face. We can have this connection because the bard's characters show some level of truth. They are sufficiently human. Others, often his characters, showcase very complex behavioral problems. Shakespeare's tragedies in particular are marked by his uncanny ability to depict mental illness and disorders. We'll have a look at his play Hamlet, King Lear, Macbeth, and Othello, and primarily engage with the protagonists. Derek Jacobi, in the 1980 BBC version of Hamlet, plays him as, and I quote, a mentally unstable man who not only trips from a state of clarity to a state of insanity and back again in the flash of a moment, but one who yet knows that this is happening to him, unquote. So this unhinging, not completely crazy, look at the nuanced reading of Hamlet. Ben Jonson wrote that Shakespeare was not of an age, but for all time. And we know that Ben Jonson is spot on and absolutely right. If it were not, we would not be talking of him in this fiercely chaotic times of the pandemic of COVID-19 and the relevance of what he has shared with us in his works. Timing is in fact a prism through which Shakespeare's universal genius is revealed to us. You can see and read his plays countless number of times, but because of Shakespeare's rich renderings and poetic mastery, fuller understanding of his characters and verse comes at the intersection of the performance you are seeing or you are editing or you are reading at that very moment in your own time and mind. Othello, Shakespeare himself shows us evolving psychosis in Othello. Proud and noble warrior that he is, and so smitten in love with Desdemona, Othello lets mere suspicion work in him from the inside as Iago works on him from the outside. The speed with which illusion becomes Othello's reality is not purposed just for theatrical necessity, but is central to Shakespeare's portrayal. The whole of his transformation happens in one single scene, less than 500 lines of verse. Tragic incidents and traumatic moments are not requirements for psychosis. We all know that. But look at the way it is turned around. A seed of concern, self-planted or put there by someone else and fertilized with insecurity, can, in less than 500 real life, lead to a fully infested brain. So it's not something, it is this connect, it is this span times across the centuries that Shakespeare's intuition of very fine human psychology straddles those centuries and makes that connect with us. To a lesser degree, we can also see Iago's psychopath evolving, but that's through his own report. He mentions in his first soliloquy, and I quote, the thought abroad that his wife Emilia and Othello have had an affair. In his second soliloquy, he describes how he is using that vague suspicion to fuel his own inwards. And this fuels his own psychosis. And I quote the lines, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards, unquote. Iago is definitely a villain, and he's clearly ticked off at being passed over for promotion, but he's also a master psychologist. Seeing Othello approach, Iago can tell from his demeanor that not even drugs shall ever medicine thee to that sweet sleep which thou owedest yesterday, unquote. Yes, troubled sleep is one of the symptoms of depression and psychosis. When we look at Macbeth, a very, very vibrant debate which doesn't seem to see the end of the day is the debate in literature whether or not the weird sisters, or what we call the witches, merely untapped Macbeth's intention or prodded him to murder. Some scholars are absolute in the beliefs that the weird sisters tell Macbeth what is already in his mind. And I've seen it played that way on the clue of Banquo's, "Good sir, why did you start and seem to fear things that sound so fair?" However, in text-centric productions, while Macbeth has a desire to be king, he is not prescribed to be subscribing to regicide. He is not predisposed to committing regicide. Indeed, he had just saved his king from invasion and treason. Macbeth, to me, is no different from anybody wishing to be a CEO of the company. That doesn't mean he's predisposed to killing the person who started that company and putting the blame of it on others ahead of him. If the weird sisters or the witches, whichever way you want to address it, or you're familiar with it, in Macbeth, supposing told any one of us, "Hail you are a Nobel Prize winner," we would startle and seem to fear the thing that sounds so fair too. For though we have that desire, we would consider it as an impossible thing, and impossible as impossible as being Thane of Cawdor and king thereafter would seem to Macbeth at the moment he hears these salutations. So this is that he talks about. And what about King Lear? In King Lear, Shakespeare has delved into, mind you, an 11th century text and a 17th century treatment. Those are not the days of geriatrics. 21st century is the century that where geriatrics is center stage. But here is a man who explores the travails, the agonies of old age. How Lear is possessed in his mind, and he wants to hold on to himself. He doesn't want to go mad, and yet how things are slipping because he is very old and the process of aging cannot escape. So after these very nuanced readings that Shakespeare crucibles for us amongst his male protagonists, let us look at two other female protagonists of his tragedies. And they are Lady Macbeth and Ophelia. I take these two in particular. Lady Macbeth is perhaps one of the most powerful Shakespearean examples of a haunted mind. Naturally, ambitious and power-hungry, Lady Macbeth slips into madness along with her husband Macbeth as she tries to satiate her unquenchable thirst for power. Today, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. This occurs as an effect of witnessing a traumatizing event in Lady Macbeth. The lady has aided in the homicide of the king and Banquo. This, compounded with the mental instability of her husband, most likely led her to develop PSDT. Symptoms include reliving the horror of the moment, depression and feelings of meaninglessness with oscillations between emotional detachment or avoidance and arousal. Throughout the play, Lady Macbeth constantly exhibits these symptoms. They are deeply rooted in her character. OCD, what we call obsessive compulsive disorder. This behavior is the interchange between obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are thought processes that cause a great deal of anxiety. For example, images or impulses that are constantly on the subject's mind. Compulsions are acts that are designed to counter the obsessions, to decrease the level of anxiety. Lady Macbeth is consumed with thoughts of the atrocities that her husband and herself have committed, and with the fear of being discovered. Her compulsive way of dealing with the obsession is the constant washing of her hands. This irrational behavior is an integral part of OCD, and where she says the famous lines, "All the perfumes of Arabia can never sweeten this hand." And then parasomnia. A general term, we use parasomnia as a general term in abnormal behavior during sleep, such as somnambulism, and in plain terms, sleepwalking. Lady Macbeth displays intense episodes of parasomnia after the murders of the king and Banquo. And according to Professor Nick Dale, and I quote, "It is very likely that this episode was perhaps triggered by the traumatic memory of the murder of Banquo," unquote. This supports the conclusion that post-traumatic stress disorder may be the root cause of Lady Macbeth's ailments. And we all have read, and probably some of us have seen it on YouTube or watched the film, where the Lady Macbeth's famous sleepwalking scene, which is the amalgamation of her mental illness along with it. It is an episode of parasomnia, and she also displays her obsessive compulsive urge to wash her hands of the blood. Shakespeare may have used these sleepwalking episodes as a literary device to unveil the bare bones of Lady Macbeth's mental illness. A cruel persona shows while she's awake, yet her conscience, her guilt is revealed in her sleep. So, what we gather from all this, that Lady Macbeth suffers from profound depression. The doctor tells Macbeth that she is, and I quote, "not so sick, my lord, and she's troubled with thick coming fancies that keep her from her rest," unquote, which is a perfect description of the undue worries that often haunt our nights and crowd peace from our sleep. Macbeth replies, and I quote, "Cure her of that. Canst thou not minister to a mind diseased? Pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow, raise out the written troubles of the brain, and with some sweet oblivious antidote, cleanse the stuffed bosom of that perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart." Unquote. If Macbeth were living today, the doctor would answer with, "Yes, we have an array of medications we prescribe in conjunction with a period of psychotherapy." In the 11th century, the play is set in the 11th century, 17th century written play, the doctor pointedly says, and I quote, "Herein the patient must minister to himself." Unquote. That's true even today. And even when using medication, when suffering from depression, we still must minister to ourselves with the help of trained therapists, of course. But when we slip into psychotic impairment or madness, we cannot minister to ourselves. What Shakespeare has conveyed, and that is why these examples from these plays that Shakespeare wrote many centuries ago, but intersect our lives in the most unprecedented and unchallenged times that world has ever recorded in the past history, is to show the connect, and is to also show the kind of stigma that is associated with those who are struggling with mental health issues. Over the centuries, now I will discuss Ophelia in Hamlet, we have seen that in Hamlet, Ophelia has evolved into a symbol of vulnerability and misfortune. Whereas Lady Macbeth developed mental disorders directly linked to her own actions, Ophelia is more the victim than anyone else. Her father, her brother, and the love interest in her life, that is Hamlet, cause her suffering that leaves her mentally crippled. She takes her life away in a pond. Ophelia is a victim of psychological abuse. Ophelia is subject to emotional and mental abuse, especially at the hands of Hamlet, who suffers from deeply rooted mental illnesses himself. Symptoms of a victim suffering from psychological abuse roughly include decreased cognitive functions or confusion, where you cannot function normally because you are compromised, your brain functions are compromised, even if you have an IQ and an EQ of a very above average person. You get benumbed, you get your responses to stock stimuli in your environment are like a morals. And here, it also, we know it in real life, it also leads to a lot of confusion because mind is clouded, there's no clarity of thoughts, there is a stream, a tsunami of thoughts that keep coming, and it's difficult for a person to process that in a state of depression. She's also shown to have fear and extreme anxiety, desire to please the abuser, even at the expense of victims' sense of self. And that is what destroys her. And that is what leads her to ending her life. There's a sense of withdrawal, there's feelings of helplessness and depression. Stress compounded by lack of sleep, or worse, troubled sleep, heightens your reactions to external stimuli and internal stimuli too. When bad memories or inexplicable worries come galloping into the forefront of your consciousness. Even if it's all in your head, you physically wince. Individuals who have a mental illness frequently report negative interactions with employers, landlords, and the police, or social exclusion by potential friends. Use of the term as a catch-all of obsessive compulsive disorder, as a catch-all term for all of those or anyone or someone who is attentive to detail or refers to a person who frequently changes his or her mind as bipolar. The truth is, we still have a long way to go when it comes to educating people about mental health. The stigma of having a mental illness is as bad as it has ever been. And finally, what are our takeaways from Shakespeare's plays, where he has very maturely dealt with these issues? The first step in addressing is acknowledging it, be it depression, be it any other mental disorder. It is an understanding that you have a problem, to own your problem. And as I mentioned, it takes about 4 to 6 years for one to address the issue. You don't even know what's happening. So how will you address it? You don't even know that these things are happening within you. So it takes some years that you actually encounter and come to face to face with it. That is why it is important for others to look for signs and step in and help if they can. We need to make sure that it doesn't result in suicide. National crime records and others in different countries of the world, stats reveal that there is an attempted suicide in India every 3 minutes, and a student commits suicide every hour. We have got a very bad name as being the ignominy of being the suicide capital of the world amongst the young. Mothers need to bring up the children and boys in particular mindfully, and also teach them the value of respecting another individual and their life. Because the very fact here, it's not just mothers, it's also the role of the parents. What is happening? What happened in the case of this young life that was just extinguished in a second? Sushant Singh Rajput, who had endeared himself with his brilliant essaying of an eclectic number of roles that he played in various films. But what happens, and Sushant Singh Rajput becomes a metaphor for all those who go that way. The reason being that our society trains, and all of us at some point, I personally, and I speak with absolute responsibility, that each one of us has at some point or the other subscribed, wittingly or unwittingly, to this notion of success. And what is that success and where does it lead to? I think that film, The Three Idiots, very beautifully kind of made a brilliant analysis of what goes on into our education system. There are many films thereafter, but I'll just touching upon it to bring out that. And what we are not equipping our young from day one is how to handle failures, because success is transient. You can't be there forever. And I love the quotation of Satya Nadella on the very first day when he came to take charge of the Microsoft head. And Times of India ran an interview, the very first that the country read about him. And he said, and I quote, I'd rather not quote, I'll just paraphrase, that I am interested in the rise and fall of civilizations, of big business houses, of individuals. Why did he say that? Because that itself speaks volumes for the transience of all this that defines success. So he began on a very realistic note that you can't forever be on that high zenith of your career. You have to, because no matter how brilliant and illustrious a family may be, or what brilliant and illustrious a civilization may be, everybody goes through that cyclic pattern. So we as a society need to respond to training of how to handle failures. And I think I'll make a very quick digression, but a very relevant one, and that is how I read somewhere that how Australian Army, when it is recruiting its commandos, what is that one thing that they're looking for in the CVs of the prospective commandos? I don't want to throw it open for responses. I would have loved to have, if there is anybody who can respond, that what is that one thing that they could be looking for when they are training commandos. And you know that if any army across the world, that is one thing everybody yearns for, to be a commando of his or her own army. It is that the CV must show some failure, because the recruiters believe that somebody who has tasted failure is far better equipped to handle the security and be in the commando mission. That is what we need to delve into. That is what we as a society lack. We need to make this a public health issue and have people speak about it and remove the stigma about this. We have done this for cancer, we have done this for diabetes, we have done this for HIV, so why not for mental health and mental illness issues? Right kind of awareness through conversation, dialogue, and understanding of what depression is, take mental health acceptable, and people will open up and share their feelings, emotions and sufferings. And that is why at the very beginning of the presentation, I brought out the engagement that UGC made. And I think we need to applaud the University Grants Commission for that endeavor to come alive to the response and be responsible in forming committees. And we all know, we all are aware, some of us are also part of those committees of being student counselors, reaching out to students, primarily because to avert such things from happening and losing out young lives. It is very important to speak about it through media and events. The government must also step in and do their bit and acknowledge that people suffer from an illness that needs to be addressed. Why I bring in the government? Because the ratio of psychiatrists to our population, the gap is huge. I haven't gone into the statistics of it all, but I can tell you, to every 1 lakh of Indian, there is one psychiatrist. So you can imagine, out of the 1.3 billion plus that we are and still counting, what is that huge gap? I think celebrities, when they speak out, as in the case of Deepika Padukone, when she came out and spoke to NDTV about how she has been struggling about clinical depression and battling with it, also adds a lot of credibility and gives people a kind of solace that they need. Shekhar Suman, the famous television star, revealed how his son was suffering from depression. So more and more of us need to be out into the open, to have a dialogue, to have a discourse, and to come out means to destigmatize. And what we know, and I have to go back to Sushant Rajput, is that the need for speaking out, the need for somebody to be there, because we all know in our peripheral understanding of these issues that there is a passing thought, and if that moment is arrested, suicide doesn't happen because you pass over. I would like to quote Sophie Rayleigh, who says, because she completely sums up what I root for, and I quote, "A new movement needs to happen. Mental health pride." Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, your speech really is a motivation for those who are facing the various facets of mental health. You eloquently address the issues of depression and negativity, the initiatives and directives that has been taken up by UGC, and you also very perfectly analyzed how various Shakespearean characters like Othello, Hamlet, Iago, they portrayed the insanity that is relevant in present times also. Being locked inside our homes, we have ample time, but still we all crave for that sweet sleep that you talked about. The depiction of trauma of old age through the character of King Lear is spot on. And you effectively related the post-traumatic disorders, the OCDs, and the mental suffering through the characters of Lady Macbeth and Ophelia. How the medical advice that was given during that time stands true even today, that we are our own doctor. Where the mental illness is concerned, we have to fight it with our own will, strength, and determination. Literature has long been regarded as providing an approach to all our spiritual, emotional, and psychological dilemmas while eluding the doctrinal categories, whether it is the Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath or any other, like The Valley by Canadian playwright John McLeod. They explore various facets of depression as perceived by their authors. Now, that was indeed a very enlightening session, ma'am. And we certainly need to do our bit as scholars, as parents, in addressing these issues of mental health. And also she spoke about how government and what should be the role of media in addressing these issues and why they should not be taken up as a stigma. So it is a responsibility that we all should take, that none of those like young guns like Sushant Singh Rajput, they should take that path of suicide anymore. So thank you so much for your enlightening lecture, ma'am. Thank you so much. And now I would like to continue with our session. I would now like to invite Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal. She is Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Navyuk Girls PG College, Lucknow. She has a tremendous teaching experience of about 3 decades of both UG and PG classes. She specializes in American literature, and her doctoral thesis was on Thomas Wolfe, an American novelist of 1930s. She has to her credit several research papers in various journals and newspapers. Besides this, she has also participated in panel discussions on various public platforms. She visited Australia as a member of Group Study Exchange Program as a teacher representative. Additionally, she is actively involved with the schemes regarding education of poor children and women empowerment. I now request her to please share her thoughts on the issue. Sangeeta ma'am, you may start now.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you. This is a slight problem. We cannot see you. Please switch on your video, ma'am. Ma'am, unmute yourself. Yes. Yes, ma'am. You're now visible. Welcome, ma'am. Ma'am, you may proceed.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First, let me take this opportunity to thank the principal of MAHARAJA BIJLI PASI Government PG College, Dr. Manju Dikshit, who's a dear friend also, for inviting me on this platform. And then I would like to thank and congratulate Dr. Sarita Singh, Head of the English Department, and Dr. Shweta Mishra for organizing this national webinar on a very significant topic. My greetings to Dr. Ranu Unial, if she is there, Professor R.P. Singh, and Dr. Meenakshi Pahwa, and all the participants of this wonderful webinar. Okay, so today's topic is anxiety, depression, and negativity during COVID-19, literary expressions and reflections. And we have been talking about anxiety, depression, and negativity during this period. But as I see it, they are all related together and arise out of our uncertainty and fear of unknown. And they have always been there. It is nothing new. But as we grope in the dark, the overflow of information in these times seem to overpower and overshadow our lives to an extent that we feel depressed. But I feel that depression is like a beast that we have to tame, and we have to coexist with it while moving on with our lives. And in this, I would like to quote again, which is Meenakshi's domain, Shakespeare, who had warned us long time back in Antony and Cleopatra, that make not your thoughts your prison. So we can't let negativity of any kind bog us down. Today it is COVID-19, tomorrow it may be a tsunami or an earthquake, or even a more mundane matter like failure in an interview or a
Cannot hear you. Cannot hear you. Not audible.
Ma'am, you're not audible.
Wait a minute. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll continue. So for all those who feel depressed from time to time, including myself, I want to say these words which David Mitchell, an English author, wrote in his novel Cloud Atlas, which was published in 2004 and it was shortlisted for Booker's Prize also. He says, "You say you are depressed. All I see is resilience. You are allowed to feel messed up and inside out. It doesn't mean you are defective. It just means you are human." The resilience which Mitchell talks about, the ability to bounce back no matter what, is in all of us, along with all the attributes which make us human, like fortitude, forbearance, passion, hope, faith, love, all that is necessary to fight a low spirit, a negative outlook, or bouts of depression. And in this endeavor of fighting negativity, literature helps us tremendously. Today I am going to focus on the inspirational side of literature, particularly poetry, because I believe that the poetic sensibilities of our great writers and their lives are testimony to the fact that adversity brings out the best in human beings. So to quote Emily Dickinson, "A wounded deer leaps the highest." Human potential is immense, and tragedy or tragic circumstances sometimes draw an individual out of his cocoon of safety and security to perform unimaginable acts of bravery, as we have seen several examples of it during these times of pandemic, that how people have gone out of their comfort zones and given exemplary actions. Poetry has the power to exhilarate you, uplift you, and elevate you to a spiritual plane. In Gitanjali, Tagore writes, "From the words of poets, men take what meanings please them, yet their last meaning points to thee," meaning God. So when in the poem Ode to the West Wind, Shelley appeals to the West Wind, "Oh, lift me as a wave, a leaf, a cloud. I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." He's not really exuding negativity or a desire to flee from life. Fatigued and spent, he seeks energy, assertion, positivity, and vigor from the West Wind, imploring, "Be thou me, impetuous one," and leaving his immortal message of hope for humanity. If winter comes, can spring be far behind? Have you ever thought how these immortal expressions of these great poets came into being? If we take a close look into their lives, we'll realize that their greatest creations were born out of the most dismal circumstances of their lives. John Milton, for example, turned completely blind in 1652. And for the last 22 years of his life, he spent them all in darkness. He was blind. Enough reason for a great writer to settle into depression. But it was he who wrote in his poem on his blindness, "They also serve who only stand and wait." Surrendering his will to God completely and moving on with his creative endeavors, Milton wrote his magnum opus Paradise Lost between 1658 and 1664, followed by Paradise Regained. C.S. Lewis, in his book The Problem of Pain, writes that mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it is more common and also more hard to bear. But that same pain can give you an impetus to create and realize your dreams and visions. The famous romantic poet John Keats asks us in the letters, or rather he tells us in the letters of John Keats, "Do you not see how necessary a world of pain and troubles is to school an intelligence and make it a soul?" The acceptance of pain as a necessity comes from a writer who himself suffered from intermittent periods of depression as he went through a severe financial crisis and unfair criticism of his great works like Endymion and The Eve of St. Agnes. In fact, Endymion, when it was published in 1818, and which he had termed as a trial of my powers of imagination, was called drivelling idiocy by critics like Lockhart. Keats died at the young age of 25 due to tuberculosis, but gave us such delightful and profound expressions as "A thing of beauty is a joy forever," or a message of affirmation in these lines from Endymion: "In spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits." Literature, with its flights of fancy, dramatic expressions, and ingrained truth, provides its readers with solace, companionship, empathy, and understanding. As African American writer Langston Hughes writes in his autobiography, The Big C, I was unhappy for a long time and very lonesome, living with my grandmother. Then it was that books began to happen to me. And I began to believe in nothing but the books and the wonderful world in books. Literature can not only transport you to another world, but sustain and can also uplift you. Whenever I read Wordsworth's I wandered as a cloud, I wandered lonely as a cloud, I'm transported to the world of beautiful blossoms. And although I have never seen a field full of daffodils, let alone 10,000 at a glance, but when Wordsworth writes, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils, I'm no less delighted than the poet, and can actually visualize those beautiful flowers dancing in soft breeze. Often in the face of such situations like the pandemic, we feel hopeless and find it difficult to cope and fall into anxiety and depression. But whenever that happens, it's time to turn to literature. Hope springs eternal in the human breast. Man never is, but always to be blessed, said Alexander Pope, who had ample reason to be depressed. His entire poetic career testifies to his indomitable spirit. Pope suffered from tuberculosis of his spine since the age of 12 and fought with deformity and health problems throughout his life. Religious persecution, as his family was Catholic, and no formal education as he was banned from his schools and universities were some of the problems added to his lot. But this did not stop him from taking it upon himself to raise the flagging spirits of English literature and take it to new heights with his vigor of satire or the understated sublimity of a mock epic like Rape of the Lock. Since his critics and detractors were many, Pope became adept in handling criticism and provides us with a lesson on how to turn negative into positive, particularly a good advice in today's fake world of social media when he says, trust not yourself, but your defects to know. Make use of every friend and every foe. Now we cannot but be inspired by this immortal line of Tennyson from his famous poem Ulysses, to strive, to seek, and not to yield. This last line of a great poem is frequently used to motivate people from various walks of life. But do we know that Tennyson also suffered from depression? The poem was written in 1833, but was published in 1842 after a 10-year hiatus in which Tennyson wrote but did not publish anything. He was so dejected by the severe criticism of his second volume of poetry that he withdrew into himself. And he also suffered heavy financial losses due to wrong investments. But he was not deterred by these crippling circumstances and wrote in Ulysses, how dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rest unburnished, not to shine in use. As an answer to his critics, his masterpiece In Memoriam was published in 1850. If we look at American literature, it is also full of such examples of fortitude, courage, and hope, which inspire humanity to rise above personal chaos and suffering. Emily Dickinson, for example, a great American poet, never ventured outside her home and lived a life of a recluse. A woman who had all the reasons to be depressed, living in isolation, and a poet who was called morbid due to her obsession with death. But she wrote something as beautiful and inspiring as hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Another American woman poet, Angela Morgan, born in 1875, lived through both world wars and the Great Depression and was declared bankrupt in 1935 after constant financial problems. She had worked as a journalist, so she was well aware of the things which were going around her. But she is full of affirmation and hope and empowers the readers with a positive approach towards life when she writes in her poem In Spite of War, in spite of war, in spite of death, in spite of all man's sufferings, something within me laughs and sings, and I must praise with all my breath. Some of the most inspiring poetry belongs to African American poets of 20th century. One of my favorites is Maya Angelou, a woman who had to write a series of 7 autobiographies to cover an entire gamut of life, which was full of negativity in terms of unstable family life, sexual abuse, racial hatred, work as a sex worker, a nightclub dancer, and so on. But at the same time, it was also a life full of achievements as a journalist, an actress, director, producer of plays, movies, TV programs, an activist in the civil rights movement, and last but not the least, a great writer. And when this phenomenal woman writes, out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that is rooted in pain, I rise. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that is wondrously clear, I rise. She is challenging us to do the same, to rise above the trappings and shortcomings of our physical and mental worlds, especially she is more pertinent if we see it during this pandemic period. African American poetry depicts that resilience of a spirit which comes from surviving a battle of racism through several generations in the past. Langston Hughes, a prominent African American poet and a leader of Harlem Renaissance, writes about a message from a mother to son in the poem called Mother to Son, where the mother says, "Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair." Finally, I would finish off by saying that the only way to fight depression and negativity is to come out of yourself and look around and learn from the examples of others, particularly those who did not choose to be the victims of their circumstances, but emerged triumphant despite all odds. In the end, I would like to quote the last lines of the famous prose poem, Desiderata, written by Max Ehrmann in 1927. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world. Be cheerful, strive to be happy. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
It was privilege listening to your wonderful thoughts. You effectively summed up how poetry offers an escape from the harsh circumstances of life, with examples of inspiring works of Shelley, Milton, Keats, Tennyson, American writers like Emily Dickinson, Angela Morgan, and African American writers like Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes. Man is definitely shown as a point of reference to display an awareness of the complexities of the mind and the identity, and therefore literature is considered to be one of the best tools that reflects and focuses on such problems and developments. Situations like the present ones, they bring a revolution in art and literature which try to find some compatibility with the troubles of the modern man. And it was really an informative session. It really helped in creating an insight regarding how literature has addressed various issues of anxiety and frustration. Thank you so much, ma'am. And now we move on to our question answer session. We have some questions. This question is directed to Professor R.P. Singh, sir. Sir, are you here?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Somebody has asked, how can those people who are just not able to create or write anything can survive this pandemic, can fight their depression and anxiety?
Writing is not for them because we have survived from the very beginning of our civilization, when in a very stone age, before that people survived. So this discourse is for literature is for those who know how learn. Even you can have the folklore, you can have the folk element, we have folk wisdom, we have popular literature, popular culture. So in the cultured society, it may be any cultured society, we have many patterns, many aspects, many trajectories of thought around, and that give us power to sustain, power to go ahead, power to move.
Yes.
Yeah. So for
Thank you.
everyone, the connected web of society, that gives strength to move ahead. Yeah.
Yes,
That is my take. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question is for Dr. Meenakshi Pava, ma'am. What could have been the source or inspiration behind Shakespearean characters like Hamlet and Othello? Ma'am?
Hello.
Do we have?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. We have a question that what could have been the source?
Yeah. Yes. The source and inspiration. Thank
Yes,
you for
ma'am.
that question. It's a very, very intelligent question. You see, Shakespeare, first and foremost, never really wrote as you and me would think somebody. For him, theatre was business. And it was never meant to be a piece of literature the way he's apotheosized today, the way he's deified today. He was a smart aleck, a person who was in the business of theatre, who had come away from Stratford to London to make it big. And the fact that he was the holder of horses and also ridiculed and mocked by Graham Greene, one of the university wits. But that did not deter Shakespeare. The reason is that he looked for, and mind you, today we are doing adaptation theory. Shakespeare was adapting from just about any kind of source, from any, from literature anywhere in the world. That is why you have his settings in Italy, you have settings in London, you have Moore as a hero. Othello, after all, has African ancestry. So primarily, and even for that matter, Hamlet. Hamlet, we all know, is what is called a Eurotext. He's drawn from it. So he picked on these successful narratives that were already extant in the society, whether it was, mined from sources centuries prior to. He had that intuitive understanding of what character to pick from history, to pick from social life, or to pick from the marginals. That is why his fool is very iconic. I couldn't deal with that. That's another separate randomness. And so what basically he was trying to do is make a successful play. He was not impelled or driven by any intellectual pursuits, let me tell you that. And it's rather much to the credit of the bard that though his motivations are far removed from literature, he is completely an icon and a cross, even when we are striving to create a space for a post-colonial narrative, literature, and every other genre. So it's primarily a need to make good business. Everything else followed.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I hope that answers the question of whosoever asked.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes, ma'am. There's another question for you, ma'am. What can you suggest as a way out of mental obsessions?
First and foremost, I have my limitation as much as I'm interested in the subject, and primarily because I feel that we as academicians and people in active academics face a huge chunk of human population of our country that defines the future of our country. So I am very personally invested in the mental health of our students and the youth at large. Having said that, I still must confess my ignorance at being an expert, but whatever my understanding is that how to fight obsessions, it is a disorder. It requires, you can't, that is why I quoted that she will have to minister to himself. You can, and you normally are left to your own devices despite the medication and so on, because ultimately you have to fight your demons. No amount of psychiatric medication, no amount of psychotherapy can really pull you out of that, lower depths, as it were, unless you yourself have decided that I'm going to make it. And therefore, there are, I do read, because I'm interested, I do read, there are very advanced levels of medication now with minimal side effects that cater to possibly all kinds of medical issues of mental health across the spectrum. Again, having said that, it will require a professional intervention and psychotherapy for anybody you can't just do it by yourself. Certainly not. That is why I said the need for help in my paper, the need for help, the need to reach out. And I was a bit compressed thinking that I should not overspill and eat into somebody else's speaking time. I wanted to expand on one thing, and that is this whole idea of the youth of today driven by all the cultural, vectors of the American cultural, civilizational history and memory that seem to be all pervasive. And that, to me, this whole idea of an overriding materialism in the youth of today, where values have taken a drumming to the point of virtually being non-existent, because if you have high values, you're supposed to be completely out of sync of the times, because whoever reaches the post first is the best. There are many factors that contribute to mental health issues, and sadly, a decade ago, the world sat agog saying that India would be the youngest nation in the world. Yes, we are. But we are also the suicide capital of the world. We also have a huge, approximately over 16% of 1.5 billion plus, 1.35 billion plus of our populations struggling with mental health issues. And this is not just an urban malaise. It goes across the country. It is there in the rural India. It's very much there in the urban setup. It is not urban centric at all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a question for Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal, ma'am, also. Ma'am, Sangeeta, ma'am, are you there?
Yes.
Yes. In your opinion, what is the force of creativity of these great writers to write such motivational poems in spite of their individual psychological conditions?
See, as I have already told you, that adversity sometimes brings out the best in human beings. So adversity or difficult circumstances or sadness, you can say, becomes a force in itself. You can take it either as a challenge, or you can let itself overpower you and you can be defeated. It is as simple as that either you be a winner or you be defeated by it. So these writers, and remember that they were greats, not just because they wrote something beautiful, but because they had great minds and they were intellectuals. So they overcame whatever odds came in front of them, whatever difficulties they had. And Shelley, if you remember, wrote that our sweetest songs come out of our saddest, thoughts or experiences. So this is the reality, that when we are, and if you apply it to yourself to any situation, suppose you are caught, in a situation of life and death, then you will perform your best, you will do your utmost to come out of it. So for these poets, as like other people in similar situations, when they are caught with these circumstances where they have to be either bogged down by them or to emerge victor, they chose to be, victorious, and they triumphant over their odds. That's all. All of us can do it with our willpower, with our spirits, with the resilience I was talking about. It is in all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such inspiring words. May I now invite Dr. Shweta to please present the summary of the sessions. Dr. Shweta Mishra.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Am I audible? Okay. So, the theme of today's webinar has been anxiety, depression, and negativity during COVID-19 pandemic, literary expressions and reflections. Today's webinar started with the invocation of the blessings of Goddess Saraswati. Then our venerated principal, Professor Manju Dikshit, welcomed our eminent guest, and Dr. Sarita Singh introduced the theme of the webinar. COVID-19 pandemic has affected our lives to an unimaginable extent. To talk of social distancing, physical distancing, yes, affected we are. To talk of economic depression, yes, we all have been worrying for that security as well. To talk of emotional and psychological effect of this pandemic on us, we don't know with what % surety can we guarantee that we are emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually strong and mature enough to cope up with such adverse times. During pandemic times, as we all know, that depression and negativity is on the rise. It is adversity that tests our perseverance and spiritual strength. And how does literature provide a support system? Literature does provide one because literature is all about life and experiences, and writers not just reflect the time and society in which they lived, but they also delve into troubled minds of people in their works, and thus literary studies become wonderful psychological studies as well. Our distinguished speakers have wonderfully correlated how literature can help us sail through these tough times. Our keynote speaker, Professor R.P. Singh, talked and perspectives of the theme of this webinar. He went on to discuss the creative process during these pandemic times, the state of literature and psyche during pandemic. He talked about the blurred boundaries, a kind of collage that has developed during this time. Depression is an outcome of anxiety that leads to enormous phase of negativity. He took pain to explain the morphology behind the making of the theme of this webinar, and he divided the creative phase into phase of trauma, then urge, resilience, and he also told about two kinds of literature, that is literature produced as per the needs and sanctions of critics and publishing world, and literature evolved, that is the free flow of ideas and the saga of human heart. Then he went on to discuss about the various phases of COVID-19 and the literature that branches out from those phases, like the phase of enthusiasm, paradox, negotiation, and introspection. Then we had our next distinguished speaker, Dr. Meenakshi Pava. She told her that in these fiercely chaotic times, how literature can be useful, and she talked about Shakespeare's tragedies, sufficiently human, and she also showcased how some characters from Shakespearean tragedies have been showcased by Shakespeare to tell about mental disorders and illness. She told that depression is a state when everything feels so hard. One drags oneself through the entire day. It is a kind of paralysis that sets in. So she talked about the disturbed, psychotic, and nutty states of mind and the volatility and need to draw our attention towards this theme. And for this purpose, she made use of examples of Shakespearean tragedies like Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, King Lear, Hamlet, and Othello. She took examples of the heroines from Shakespearean tragedies, Lady Macbeth and Ophelia. Dr. Meenakshi Pava's discourse was extremely vibrant with quotations and lines from the famous tragedies of Shakespeare. She painted alive the characters of Shakespeare, male and female both, and told how inexplicable worries torment human minds. She effectively told how the stigma associated with any mental disorder has to be addressed, and she said that we first need to be aware of that problem, we need to own it and address that issue. She also told about the alarming stage of attempted suicide cases in India, that India has got this tag of suicide capital in the world. And she also touched upon the issue of Sushant Singh Rajput, and that we need to equip our young lot to how to face the failures, because success is transient. And then towards the end, Dr. Pava also told about the recruitment strategy of commandos in Australia and how their CVs that should have failure incidents also in them, and to become the eligibility criteria for selection. It actually came as a huge learning and psychological boost for all of us. Then the next distinguished speaker that we had with us is Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal. She addressed the issue of depression, negativity, and showed how literature inspires us and it can help us during low phases of our lives. She gave examples from poetry of English, American, and African American poets. From English poetry, she quoted Shelley and his Odes to the West Wind, Milton's On His Blindness, John Keats, and Endymion. She told how mental pain also can give us an impetus to create. She quoted lines like Keats's "A thing of beauty is a joy forever," or Shelley's "When winter comes, can spring be far behind?" To boost up the confidence, and to provide encouragement to human race. She also went on to talk about Wordsworth's daffodils, and she also gave example of Pope, who suffered from physical deformity, and he was banned from schools and universities, and how he took literature to new heights through his satires. She went on to talk about Tennyson's Ulysses, that Tennyson himself suffered from depression. In 1833, he wrote Ulysses, that was published in 1842, and yet he gave such beautiful lines like to strive, to seek, and not to yield. Then she also gave examples from American literature that is filled with fortitude, courage, and hope, like Emily Dickinson and Angela Morgan. Then she gave examples of African American poets, especially Maya Angelou, and her poem Phenomenal Woman. This was followed by an interactive question-answer session. In fact, it would not at all be an exaggeration to state that all our speakers have not simply spoken on the issue, but I would want to, through my personal association, I would want to say this, that they all practice it as well in their lives. And my association with them is a big proof of it, because I know that how they have also appreciated my books that I have written, and Dr. Meenakshi Pava, she was like a guiding light throughout this entire, she gave me the making of this webinar, she gave me directions how to go about it. And R.P. Singh sir also, he has also appreciated my work and was kind enough to write the first review of my book. I would like to conclude with one of my poems from the collection The Most Orange, that is titled, There is no limit to our rising. I am not perfect, and I do not want to be. Where would be the scope to learn and rise and grow? I would outgrow all the others then. Nothing would attach itself to me. No colors would add on to enhance. Nobody would clap on my standing after the fall. I am good now. Each day is new. Each hour a celebration. Each sunrise has new earth to touch. Nervousness and anxieties, fears and disappointments. And then back the swing that catapults me to heights. Each feather that comes and attaches to my wing dazzles my flight to a new cloud, and in that flash the moist clouds cushion me to a fresh foundation that enlighten me to my soul. And once again, I would want to thank all our eminent speakers, Professor R.P. Singh, Meenakshi Pava ma'am, and Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal. She has been my teacher, and it has been a 20-year-long relationship that has developed into a beautiful understanding that needs no words to express. She is no less than a mentor, a guide who's always been there, motivating and showering love on me all the time. So thank you so much. With these words, I would want to conclude my summary. Over to you, Sarita ma'am, for vote of thanks.
Hello. Thank you, Shweta, for such a compact summary, and your poem was as insightful as always. Listening to the valuable and insightful address of our prestigious guests, I hope that this webinar certainly provided an interactive podium where we all as a unit could contribute towards fighting the negativity that is creeping into our lives in these critical times. On behalf of the Department of English of MAHARAJA BIJLI PASI Government PG College, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all our renowned speakers, Professor R.P. Singh, Dr. Meenakshi Pava, and Dr. Sangeeta Kotwal, for taking time out of their respective schedules to provide guidance to explore literature as a means to overcome various facets of depression. Further, I would like to take this opportunity to place on record my heartfelt thanks to our patron, our mentor, Professor Manju Dikshit ma'am, who's always there with her constant support. Special thanks to Mr. Raj Verma and Mr. Sunil Verma for their technical support and coordination. I would also like to thank all those who are attending this interaction, the principals of various colleges, the faculty members of various colleges, the research scholars, and all the other students. Stay positive, be creative, explore the possibilities of your potential. With these words, I would just like to say that this world has too much to offer. We just need to find our own solace. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
पॉइंट किया जाए मैम? ठीक है, नमस्ते सर, नमस्ते मैम। अब इसी कड़ी में अब इस मीटिंग को यहीं पर वाइंड अप किया जा रहा है। ओके, थैंक यू ऑल।